Well, hello, and welcome to the first episode of A Coven Reads podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Randi. We, my coven mates and I,
Hi.
will be reading through the book Keeping Her Keys by Cyndi Brannen. Depending on reception, we may then read through other witchcraft books. We haven't really talked much about it yet. We're a small coven. We're located in Pennsylvania. By some matter of weird fate, we all ended up being earth signs. I don't know, we just got along. And we're still in the process of fully forming our coven and solidifying some of our traditions. So yeah, I'm one of your hosts. I'm known as Valkyrian on social medias. I'm a metalsmith as well as a traditional-ish witch. And sometimes those two aspects coalesce, and my specialty is really talismans and enchanted jewelry. You can find my work on Instagram at The Void and Veil. I have worked primarily with the Morgan, and I'm just starting my journey with the Hekate. So I just wanted each of us to kind of start talking a little bit about what Hekate, like our understanding of who she is. I definitely was expecting some sort of history lesson opening this book in the very beginning, but I definitely got the feeling that she wants you to come to this book with some knowledge of who she is. Everybody else kind of feel the same way?
Yeah,
Definitely did. Yeah.
Okay.
Like
so
maybe not that you're an expert, but just you're at
Yeah.
least aware that she is a goddess of importance and you want to know
and
more.
that's from the Greek pantheon, and that she has to do with witchcraft, I think, is kind of the general assumptions that you need to have in mind when approaching this book.
Yeah, so like my personal was that she was originally like a titaness, and she's the goddess of witchcraft, rules over land, sea, and sky, and basically that she has an epithet for like everything you can think of. So I'm gonna hand it over to Ryder, my coven mate.
Hello, so my name's Ryder. I am Silver Shield Maiden on Instagram and TikTok, and I identify mostly as a green witch. I do a lot of hearth magic, protective magic, and herbal-based healing, herbal medicine. I've been practicing for about 3 years this December, and I work with Odin, Hekate, and the Morgan. Hekate, she came to me at a crossroads in my spiritual path where I felt like I either had to fully commit and surrender myself to fully being an out witch, or continue to sort of stay in the closet. And obviously I came out fully as a witch. I see Hecate as less of the crone figure and more of not mothering to me, more like a mom friend, I like to say, or like a trusted friend or a trusted aunt, where I am learning from her experiences, and I feel like she's teaching me through her own sort of life experience. She gives me the keys to learn for myself. And outside of my craft, I am a digital creator, a photographer, and a mixed media artist.
She's a wonderful photographer.
Thank you.
So good.
Becky, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Becky, and you can find me on social media at Beams of Wildlight with 2 E's. I am a lot more elemental in my path, and I'm learning a ton of chaos as I now have other people to reflect my practice off of. But I only started working with deities about a year ago. So right now I'm working with Persephone and Horus, as many of us are taught from the Egyptian pantheon. So I'm coming at this book with familiarity of deity work, but not specifically Hekate. I've only worked with her very briefly once, about 2 years ago. I was at a friend's house. We were doing a ritual. She called her in, and she and I had a talk. She was very stern with what she wanted me to work on, and I basically argued with her about it. I'll get into that a little bit more later in one of the other topics, but
The sheer balls of that.
I know, right? I'm like, who does that? I do,
chaos
evidently.
witch.
Yeah. So I'm really interested in this course of like seeing how that relationship will develop, if it develops. But outside of my practice, in my real job in the real world, I'm a lighting designer, which means I take light and make the world pretty, mostly like on stages with theater and dance, but sometimes buildings or theme parks and the like. Pretty much anyone who wants me to light something, I will come do it.
Thank you. Though she needs probably no introduction.
Hi, everybody. My name is B, and I am your friendly neighborhood non-binary hedge witch. I've been practicing witchcraft for about 12 years now, and actually teach on my YouTube channel and TikTok as the Stitching Witch. So hi, that's me. I am an eclectic pagan, and I work with the Morrigan, Hern the Hunter, Bast, Anpu, or Anubis, as many people know him by, as well as a Pod, and of course, Hekate. Now, I guess before starting the Keeping Her Keys book, I've always kind of like dabbled in death work and kind of especially when working with the Morrigan. So I kind of feel like Hekate has always kind of come to me as that, like through that guise. So I see her most often as kind of the key keeper, the guardian of the crossroads, the kind of the chthonic goddess that she really is, the underworld aspect of her. And when I first started practicing and like kind of was in the broom closet, I had this key necklace that I actually wore instead of a pentacle. And now looking back, I kind of feel like that was her influence.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I just like that kind of like blows my mind. Like there's a lot of stuff in my life that I can pinpoint like throughout my childhood. I'm like, wait a second, why is that connected to her? Like, what the heck? I just now feel that like because I'm in a better space to work with her, she's become a lot more central to my practice, and has been encouraging me over the past like year or so to pursue my path and lead by example when it comes to like my spirituality. So yeah.
Well, thank you. I also do just want to note that there is a fifth member of our coven. She's unable to commit to the Keeping Her Keys podcast. She's due with her first child in the next month or so. So busy.
Soon.
Yes.
Soon.
But she may join us in the future if we do other series or books.
Who knows? She might even join us for just, specialty chapter or something.
Yes. So jumping right in, this book is really meant to be an introduction to modern Hecatean witchcraft. It's modern Hecatean, so it's definitely got a serious focus on Hekate. It's written by Cyndi Brannen. She's written several books. I know Entering Hecate's Garden is one that I have, but haven't had a chance to read. But she has a very evident background in psychology, and I think that you can see that in different areas of the book. To the point where I think like it's one of the foundations of what she's calling modern Hecatean witchcraft. So the book's set up into 13 cycles corresponding with the lunar cycle and beginning with the new moons. And tonight's the new moon, so we nailed that. Yay.
Woo!
And each episode will correspond with one cycle of the book. So this first episode is really the introduction, lesson 1 and lesson 2. It's going to be very discussion based. And while this book was really written from the standpoint of someone who's working through it solitarily, we're adapting it to a sort of hybrid situation. So we'll be doing solitary work and group discussion. And that's just going to be experience based. We're not meant to be teaching. We're just talking about our personal journeys and working through this book over the next year. Mm-hmm. So anyone who would like to join us, read along with us, or just wants to learn more about Hekate or deity work in general, please join us. So, B, can you explain what exactly modern Hecatean witchcraft is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like the key word here is going to be the word modern, which really distinguishes this framework, which is what Brannen calls it in the book, from a strict Reconstructionist practice. So that is really like based in tradition, right? Reconstructionist practice. They want to revive old ancient Greek practices that we find evidence of in right? But modern Hecatean witchcraft is more based in exploring the goddess Hekate through the lens of a modern witchcraft practice. And she kind of goes on and says, like, the development of highly effective witchery, or describes, I should say, modern Hecatean witchcraft as the development of highly effective witchery through the emphasis on highly effective personal development practices and witchery. So I also thought it was kind of like cool that she makes note that it isn't a tradition and that you won't be asked to join a coven. I mean, obviously we already are one prior to this, but she kind of puts that importance on the fact that you're not going to have to join some form of organization, and at the end of the course you can kind of become a keeper of her keys through self initiation, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, there's a lot of emphasis on personal development as well, and the keeping her keys framework really fits modern day issues, and is inherently political, as she stresses how imperative it is to help and provide service work for the underprivileged and like oppressed. So I really feel like there is like a strong progressive and social agenda, which I really align with myself. So yeah.
I think we all do.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. So again, like whereas a Greek reconstructionist pagan may want to rekindle the old ways or worship as dictated by ancient texts, this framework really allows for a much greater deal of personal interpretation, I feel like, and more like flexibility to experience magic and connect with Hekate as the practitioner sees fit. And then finally, I know this is like really long, she really goes into a whole section about all of this.
Absolutely.
But like like it's cool, and I think that's important, you know, that you know what the boundaries are, the guidelines are. But she really stresses the importance of three key principles: integrity, and passion. So those are detailed in lesson 2, but in general are very, very important, I think, to the framework. But that is kindness. Kindness is vital to overthrow the forces that seek to disempower the vulnerable in society. Then there is integrity, and she states that through our commitment to being sincere in all aspects of our lives, we can learn to function as our authentic selves, which I really align with, and that's something that I also kind of center at like the focus of my practice, I guess. And then finally, passion. And she kind of goes on to say that there's no room for accepting anything less than a magical life, and that this framework encourages practitioners to use the course to take life by its horns, which I definitely feel like is the vibe of Hecate a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if by that she means like you need to come out of the broom closet, or if I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about that. But I think that you know, fully embracing your power as a witch, whatever that looks like, is always something that I try to encourage people to do.
Right. Well, thank you, B.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, especially really evident in lesson 1, I can't help but be turned off by like the Christian leaning vocabulary and rhetoric choices. And I'm really imagining for people with more severe religious trauma, like you, B, that may be off-putting. Especially when she talks about like the omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent jargon. Yeah. And Becky, I think you especially may have an interesting point of view on this, coming from someone who doesn't necessarily work with or see Hecate that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think the religious trauma is probably something we all have in common to varying degrees. And probably a lot of people who find their way into witchcraft are experiencing that as well. So I think it's really important that we acknowledge the fact that we all pretty much had that same reaction to the phrasing and wording in this book. And Cyndi, she writes this, she's very upfront that it's written from the perspective of a monotheist, because she works with Hecate in that way. She sees Hecate as a monotheistic being, an entity. But she does also acknowledge that basically anything in this book can be adapted to fit your personal practice, which I appreciate. So she does say, like, I'm going to talk to you about my own personal experience, but also know that this isn't like a dictatorship of this is how you have to practice, like take what you want, leave what you don't, kind of thing. But the phrases that she uses are just very similar to the way that some Christian texts word themselves. And a distinct difference, though, that I will notice is that Brannen very frequently talks about the empowerment of self and how Hecate can help with that, versus like my Roman Catholic upbringing was very do this because I say so. There wasn't a lot of self-discovery. It was a lot more of a, and
All things for his honor type thing.
Yeah. A lot more authoritarian.
Yeah.
So keeping all of that in mind, when I go through the book, has helped to lessen the sting of some of the phrasings. For example, like this is a sentence that she pulls out in the intro where she just says, like, witchcraft is a combination of skill, knowledge, belief, and power. And so obviously her belief is in Hecate, but skill, knowledge, and power are all things that we find within ourselves. Additionally, I personally am just not a monotheist at all. So I don't even see deities like Hecate or Persephone and Horus as these all-knowing, all-powerful beings that can dictate what's going on in my life anyway. So my own personal experience with it, and this may be like the part of the trauma, is I'm just so irreverent with the deities that I work with because I cannot deal with the authority figure, and it's a lot more of a friendship and a camaraderie and how we can work together to build something.
Which, to be fair, with Persephone is like very her energy. So
it totally is, which I think is why we get along. And we can get into this in other episodes, but I feel like Persephone is Hecate light, especially in her chthonic attitudes. So she and I get along really well. But it's energies that you can tap into and work with most specifically. And so that's how I'm coming at this book. I am seeing all of this. I see her language. I see how she's presenting the information, and I'm still able to interpret it and adapt it to my own practice. One of the things that surprised me, though, when that she said that Hecate is a monotheistic, is because of her many, many epitaphs. And that was a surprise to me. That was not a piece of information that I knew when I really first started this book. I only learned it a couple weeks ago, and how you can work with one epithet or several or all of them. And obviously Brannen works with all of them, and that's how she sees her, as a much more all-encompassing being. But to get in a little bit more of the detail, in my previous interaction with Hecate, she said, you will come to me to learn the big things, but we don't work well together. Because I sat there and argued with her, and she just, that's not really the energy that she wanted to be confronted with, I think. But I'm still always very interested in expanding my knowledge, especially in a group setting, and especially about someone who I will be working with, even occasionally. So I'm still really excited to get into this book and into the details of it. In addition to the fact that the epitaphs were a surprise to me, the fact that Hecate was a maiden, mother, and crone, and that is a new development, and how that in itself is part of modern Hecatean witchcraft, was also a surprise to me, because that's how I was introduced to her as. I think that was your first experience with her as well.
Yes, I definitely think that especially practitioners who are Wiccan, or maybe have practiced Wicca in the past, oftentimes that triple goddess kind of archetype, so the maiden, mother, and crone, is applied to deities in a way that isn't necessarily historically accurate. So looking back at ancient texts again, we don't really see the maiden, mother, crone archetype anywhere, just like described anywhere. That's a more modern interpretation of Hecate, is either part of kind of like a triple goddess, or being a triple goddess herself. So yeah.
Yeah,
so
that's just so
like historical context for the three, in that she is seen as like this goddess of the land, the sea, the sky.
Right.
So there's some context, but not in the Wiccan way.
Right.
And definitely, if anything, usually never the crone in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting for me.
And it's so interesting to hear you say that, Randi, because that was definitely felt like my experience, because I was getting like a taskmaster talking to, like
Yeah.
stern, like what she wanted me to do is she just wanted me to stand up for myself more, but in a way that really felt like she wanted me to say F you to the rest of the world. And I just personally cannot be that person. So I like had a real problem with it of like, I need to care more than that. But it's because of that aspect of it, I feel like it was more of a crone mentality of her wisdom, unyielding wisdom of like, this is how you can take care of yourself better.
Gotcha.
But I do feel like that is the essence of what Hekate brings to people in general. It seems like, as the ability to stand in your power and stand up for yourself.
Yeah,
Definitely.
self-empowerment is definitely, one of. Well, she then talks on, like, she goes on to describe the idea of holy darkness. And Ryder, can you delve into that a little more?
Of course. So the holy darkness, the author talks about referring to Hecate's rise in popularity among pagans and in the witch community. And I believe that the rise in popularity probably is not in small part due to social media. It's very easy to type her name into any search bar, or even just goddess, witchcraft, and she's bound to come up in all conversations. And I actually think that might have a little bit to do with, at least me personally, coming from Christianity, where you have this very masculine figure of God, capital G God, and we tend to overcorrect. And, they say like the pendulum swings too far before it settles back in the middle. And referring to the holy darkness, you can't have light without darkness. So we tend to swing the other way when leaving Christianity. We go from the masculine, the God, the light, all the way to the other end, the darkness, and has heavy ties to femininity and the dark moon, the new moon. So Hekate is very much tied in with all of that. She has a quote in the book that I really like. She says, as we change, so does our understanding of Hekate, and so does our witchcraft. So I think the more you really get into her research, and the more you start to work with her, you do realize that it's not so much an act of protest as I thought it was to be working with her, but more coming into your own power, standing in your own power, and really just reveling in being a witch and truly, emanating that powerfulness, that really grounded femininity that she embodies.
I really love that. I feel like that's saying, like, you go from wanting to, like, stick it to the Abrahamic God to realizing, like, no, this is deep. This is worthy of my attention. And
for me, it almost felt comfortable. It felt like sort of coming home.
Right.
From this, very strict, this very uptight entire theology, to all of a sudden you have this freedom to
not feel shame.
Exactly. You just do it, and there's no guilt in any of it. You can freely express however you want to practice. And they talk about in the book, she's a demanding deity, but I think it's more she sees the power in those that she chooses, and it's demanding in the sense that she needs you to believe in yourself and stand in your power, because you really do hold the keys. You hold the keys to your own power. And also, I think the influence she's had on, or in hand with, modern feminism, because as we see the rise of women, not even necessarily in witchcraft, but just in society in general, really coming into their own and taking up space. And I think that's her embodied. That's Hekate as a whole, is just being present, taking up space, and saying, I'm here, I am powerful.
Yeah.
And that can be scary for a lot of people, I feel like, too, which is,
for
I
sure.
sort of feel feeds into the dichotomy of lightness and darkness. And like, it's holy darkness. Darkness can be scary. Being powerful for yourself can be scary, but it is like a sacred act to take care of yourself.
And Hekate is known as the torchbearer, the light bearer, and the goddess of the crossroads. So I think that calls to a lot of people as well. when they're feeling lost or they're looking for direction, to turn to her is not uncommon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like this phrasing of holy darkness that Brennan puts into the book. For me personally, I've started with this idea myself last year. I was diagnosed with depression, and so going into the winter seasons, I knew that, like, consciously for the first time ever, that was going to be really hard for me. And so I was leaning into the idea of how darkness and rest can be really powerful in and of itself, and you don't always have to be going, and just because it's dark doesn't mean things are bad. So I just really resonated with that terminology when it came up in the book as well, from my personal experience.
Yeah, I mean, I had a really similar reaction to it because for me, it's kind of the acknowledgement of my shadow self, and that, you know, my shadow self is still a legitimate part of me, and, you know, I need to work through that, but it's not bad.
I understand. I feel very similarly to everybody, it seems, definitely. But I think that for me, the way that the holy darkness has just, I guess, manifested in my life is just with this rise of witchcraft, because it has been a tool and a means of me kind of reclaiming my own power and my own sovereignty over the traumas that I kind of like experienced, I guess, as you know, growing up, because like I still found a way to be the spiritual being that I was, because like I was one of the most devout Christians. I went all in, you know, like I was an acolyte, like I was like going to go into the clergy, you know, like I was like very determined to be, you know, the best. But when that wasn't good enough, you know. Did you say Virgo? I know.
Yes, you did.
But when that wasn't good enough, you know, I found that I was accepted into the pagan community, because I was totally an oddball. Like I was such a weird, like, goth, you know, like freak. Like I was super weird looking, like straight up. So I just like, I guess like have been saved, I guess, and have been reborn as the person that I'm supposed to be in this holy darkness. And it's very important to me. And I think without it, I wouldn't be where I am today, I would say.
You're like the meme that's like, I'm going to make this my whole personality.
Literally 100%. I'm just like, I like two things, witchcraft and tattoos. So that's all I'm going to talk about.
That's you. Oh, Lord of the Rings, though. You forgot that.
Oh, and Lord of the Rings. Okay, so 3 things. Those are my 3 selves.
I think that's the really beautiful thing about modern Hecatean witchcraft as well, is that it's really brought people together, sharing similar stories of whether it's something like previous traumas with religious situations, or even just, like you said, reclaiming their own power, standing in their sovereignty. And I think this would be a good point to add that shadow work is not a replacement for therapy. If you have trauma, you feel like you need to talk to somebody, you need to go to therapy. But therapy can be a great tool to use when doing shadow work.
I think that's so important, Ryder, to mention that. I think like a lot of people who dive into shadow work when they're diving into witchcraft can get into some really deep, dark spaces without really being prepared for it. Because truthfully,
we don't want to self-diagnose and go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
and you also want to make sure you're not like spiritually bypassing, and that you're like, I'm just gonna, so like cord cuttings, you're like, I'm gonna do a cord cutting so I don't have to feel this and grow spiritually. I feel like that's an important part of shadow work in and of itself.
I think we also neglected to mention that, Randi, you had mentioned that the author has a psychology background.
Right. Yes. And that she basically says that like you know thyself, and that, you know, psychology and doing therapy, doing shadow work is a big part of this modern movement.
And I think I've heard this term a lot, and it's really kind of my favorite way to describe it to people that I'm not super out of the broom closet with. but it's like an approachable way to describe what I'm doing, and that it's like witchcraft, modern witchcraft is just spicy psychology.
Yeah.
It's just
They go
adding a
hand
little
in
bit of
hand.
flair
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
mindfulness and manifestation, intention setting, all of that stuff that people talk about, but it's just a little bit more interesting when you do it as a witch.
Yeah. All right, so moving right along. So in most of the lessons, she has at least one exercise, it looks like, that she wants us to do. And in this one, we had a course commitment ritual. And it's basically she wanted us to fully commit to the full course and the process. And the first step she has us do is develop an intention for the course. B, would you briefly explain how the book says to form your intention?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in regards to the course, she asks you to write down like all of your initial ideas regarding like what you would like to accomplish, I guess, like by the end of this 13-month course. And then to connect those common themes. So basically brainstorming, right? Then use those themes to create a single concise sentence outlining what you wish to attain by the end of the course. So she recommended using the following 3 questions to help. And those questions were, what do I hope to learn from this course? How will I be transformed by this course? And how will I use what I learned from this course?
Okay, and I think we all decided that we're comfortable sharing our intentions, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so well, B, do you want to go first since you were talking?
Yeah, sure. So my intention, it's a little bit wordy because I am naturally just a very long-winded person. But my intention is that I will walk the path of Hekate, bear her torchfire of knowledge, and establish her sanctuary. And that probably means nothing
Beautiful.
to a lot of people, but to me, what that really means is that like what I'm very interested in doing with my life is to become a like pagan clergy member. Like I want to be able to administer at what and just be a servant, a spiritual servant to my pagan community, right? And I'm hoping that by the end of this course I can really be at the point where I can provide those services for people. So yeah.
Beautiful.
Ryder, did you want to tell us yours?
Yeah, so when I was writing down my intentions for this, I had to modify my sentence so many times because I could hear her in my ear just saying, go deeper and do more, to surface level, keep going, and to really get to the root of what it was that I wanted to get from this course, what I wanted to do. So the intention that I'd come up with was that it's to be more accepting of myself and of my practice. And that comes from, I think you had talked about this maybe in a TikTok video, and it stuck with me, that quote from Practical Magic.
Yeah.
She says, you can't practice magic while you look down your nose at it. And I felt that so hard because sometimes I feel like with my practice, I'm going through the motions a little bit. You light the candle, you cleanse, you say the incantation, you say the prayer, whatever. And sometimes it feels very surface level, and sometimes I have to step back and be like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
no. I straight up like disassociate sometimes, or I'm just like, what the hell is happening? Like, where am I? Who is that?
Sometimes I'll hear my own incantations or my own spell writing, and I'm like, who do you think you are?
Right.
But I want to let go of that, and I want to truly accept my practice for being what it is, because it's beautiful and it's incredible, and I love practicing. It's my entire lifestyle. It's not just religious. It's not just it's something I do once in a while. It is daily. It's
it's a way of life. I feel that really, really in my core. I definitely feel that.
It's intertwined in every part of my daily routines.
Thank you. Becky?
Yeah, so I did it wrong because somehow, even though the ritual is called course commitment ritual, I did not recognize the fact that I was setting intentions for this course. And instead, I just like ended up setting intentions with the two deities that I actively work with, which is Horus and Persephone.
Someone else is going to do that, so don't feel
So here I am as the people who will not be following this book along to the letter of the T.
How chaotic.
And we're gonna explore together how you can use this book for other means. So the two that I ended up with were I'm building a physically healthier me, and that's my intention for working with Horu, because he's like my physical activity cheerleader. Basically, he's the one who's always making sure that I'm taking care of myself in a physical manner. And with Persephone, the one I arrived at was I'm feeling natural rhythms and building my own, because I have a lot of expectations for myself of what I should do and how I should do it. But really slowing down, sort of talking about that holy darkness, is like feeling the natural rhythms of the world and then feeling my own natural rhythms and leaning into that and just accepting it, rather than sort of like you were saying, Ryder, of like, what should I be doing? And feeling really down about myself when I don't do those things, and just having more acceptance of where I am now.
Yeah, I love that. I love that your point of view is going to be so different for this podcast. Okay, so my intention was to find my power through knowledge and practice. And the reason I say and practice is because I have a tendency to be a mild armchair occultist, in that I devour books and research at incredible speeds. I went to school to be an anthropologist, archaeologist, and that's, research is my thing. But then, it's not as natural for me to actually sit down and do the ritual. So I'm forcing myself to do those things more often. And it doesn't have to be a super planned thing. I want to be able to just do a spell and not plan for several days for it, maybe. But yeah. So
I'm sorry, that's not very Virgo of you.
I guess I'm trying to like get away from that. I'm like, oh, I gotta like temper.
Get out of your comfort zone. Yeah.
Yeah. So, when she talks about like preparing for the ritual, I just wanted to mention that, find a quiet space, all that stuff, because you don't want to be interrupted. But she says wash up before beginning. And I thought it was interesting that I had like a natural inclination to do that. I was really extra about it. I had to do like a new moon cleansing bath. And I think a few of you had said that you also.
Yeah, I like cleaned my whole house for sure.
I'd be willing to bet, Becky, you did not.
I did none of those things.
Yeah. Which is also very not Virgo, honestly.
I know. I am also like, again, not saying that we're self-diagnosing or anything, but I do think that there may be a little bit of undiagnosed ADHD that I'm working with my therapist on. Use therapy. But having like all of those steps for the ritual of like preparing yourself, it was kind of like, or I'll just sit down and write the thing and do the thing.
Yep. So does anybody have any specific experiences they had during the ritual that they want to talk about?
I know that like I had a lot of visual like manifestations, whereas when I've worked with the Morrigan or Hearn in the past, it's been more of kind of a physical sense, or just kind of like I would almost say like clear cognizance, where it's just like clear knowing or clear feeling.
Definitely with the Morrigan.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of physical manifestations with, I think, both of those deities. But with Hekate, I had a lot more visuals. Like I had almost like, I don't want to say visions because that seems very dramatic.
Right.
It's like, oh, I had a vision, and all of a sudden I'm like Professor Trelawney, I'm like, good for him. But I had this experience where I saw Hekate leading me up the steps to this like really beautiful temple, and it was just it felt very comfortable, and it was very awe-inspiring, and it was I don't know, it was a very personal experience, and it was not something that I have experienced in the past. So that was like relatively intense for me, which is after practicing for 12 years is kind of like hard for me to say, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh, what? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I can validate that for you. That I definitely, as also a practitioner of the Morgan, she's definitely like I just know.
Yeah,
Whereas
right.
with Hekate, I also got these like flashes of images, and also with her, it was very weird because it was almost like picture me as the Little Mermaid sitting on the rock. That was basically like in the ocean, and she was standing beside me, and she was showing me images in the water. It was very
Aw.
heavily both this commitment ritual and then the meditation that we do further in was very heavily water based for me.
Same.
And she basically just gave me flashes of things that like, hey, together, this is what we need to work on.
Yeah, I think that's a common experience that I know with the other deities that I've worked with. They give me a lot more physical signs of their presence, or a lot more physical signs of what they want me to do or what they're expecting of me. But with Hecate, she gives me a lot more of those sort of like intrusive thoughts where it's like you just know, you absolutely, it's like images in your mind that just pop up. And during this meditation, she kept showing me the key and lock that I use when working with her. It's a physical like iron skeleton key and lock that when I'm not working with her, I keep it locked with the key out, and then when I am working with her, I have the key in and unlocked. And she kept showing me that, as well as this pathway where she was walking alongside me, and that was really profound to me because I love the imagery of just her being sort of on my level playing field, not like a not like a I'm equal to a goddess type way, but just that she's there with me. She's there to help me on my journey, and that she's not in front of me leading me, and she's not pushing me, but she's just there to offer her guidance and be there with me.
Yeah,
So nice.
I know, especially like as a practitioner of the Morgan, that's very different for me.
Yeah.
The Morgan's kind of like running in front of me with like saying like, "Oh, come on," like, and yeah, the Hecate definitely is more of a I'm gonna stand beside you energy. Not that I don't need both of those things, but so the last thing that they kind of talk about in lesson 1 is the witch's hour of power. And it's a concept that she introduces where she basically says you should really take an hour a day for your practice. And in one of the ways that she discusses, I don't have the list in front of me. I don't know if anybody does.
It's a little bit, yeah.
Well, she has a list basically of different things that you can do during this witch's hour of power, and I know that we all had a lot of thoughts on this.
Yeah, I have the list. She lists affirmations, gratitude, journaling, intention setting, meditation, self checks, and a tarot practice. But I think we all, like you said, Randy, we all sort of felt like that was the way she presented it, as you have to do an hour every day, feels very overwhelming. And at least for me, like my brain really likes data, especially when I'm starting to feel bad about myself.
There's the
but
Virgo.
Yep, she's there somewhere. But there are actual like scientific studies saying that doing something every day can actually become too burdensome, and so you're not getting the benefit that you're trying to get out of it. While also doing something too few times isn't effective either. But the studies are for, especially in, this was in gratitude work that this study came through. But the most common benefit has been shown to be 3 to 4 times a week, or roughly every other day. But also, if every other day is too much of a schedule to keep on, and that is also overbearing, it's just like naturally try to get yourself to do something 3 to 4 times a week. And that is where the most benefit of whatever practice you're trying to include into your life really comes in. So if that also feels overwhelming to you as the reader, the listener, know that there is also scientific evidence to back up the fact that you don't have to do this if that helps you feel better, because it helps me.
I really dislike the concept of having to devote a full hour every day to your practice, because that's not realistic for everybody. There's people have careers, and there's busy moms, and sometimes it's just not possible. But I like to think that you could reframe that and sort of break up that hour over your entire day with just the little things you do every day. Like I said earlier, I like to integrate my practice into everything that I do. And if that's just sweeping your floor while, meditating or thinking of cleansing intentions, or, maybe you put moon water in your kid's bath or something, you can sort of break that up into the little things you do every day and turn your mundane daily tasks into magical tasks. And that, I think, also goes hand in hand with what the author had talked about in lesson 1 with having a magical life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My personal opinion on that is that, that's a conversation you need to have with your spirits and your deities. If you promise them something, you might want to have that conversation with them to kind of catch them up and say, hey, you've been watching me, you know that I'm struggling. I can't keep up with this. We need to revise like our agreement. Just keep them in the loop would be my suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with everything above and everything that you guys said. And I really want to just impress upon people that your spirituality should never, ever, ever feel like a burden to you, right? Like, it is a tool to help you navigate life, but you should put greater importance on yourself, your safety, and your physical health before feeling obligated to worship a deity, or you shouldn't feel any lesser because practicing an hour a day is unsustainable for you or your lifestyle. Also remember, a lot of other religions, and other people, they only go to church once a week, they're not going for an hour a day.
Or even just on major holidays.
Right, exactly. So just keep that in mind. And don't feel bad about yourself. You guys got this.
So lesson 1 kind of ends there, and I think it was just an introduction to what ideas will be covered in the book, and then from there she kind of dives more deeply into lesson 2. So for me, a lot of lesson 2 can be a bit of a review, I think, for some more experienced witches, with the concepts of the shadow self, grounding, centering, and meditation. But I do think that her audience was it was confusing on who her audience was supposed to be, in that you're supposed to come this with some knowledge of Hekate, but then that she goes over some very some of the more basic beginner
foundational practices, yes, I would say, of any sort of witchcraft practice.
That kind of threw me. I was like, oh, this is here. I know, Becky, you had said that you weren't so sure. You kind of felt like grounding, centering, and meditation was very similar to you.
Yeah, she calls it balancing, centering, and grounding. And I read through them, and I did the check-ins and practices that she had for each of those, but they all felt so similar to me that I read through that section twice or 3 times, and I'm still not sure that I get the separation, what the distinction is between them. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and see if anyone else had a much more different experience and couldn't really talk about how those were identifiable different experiences for you, because I think I take those all and put them all in one practice that I call grounding personally, but she breaks them up into 3 separate things.
No, I really agree with you that I think that these 3 things were kind of they could be all incorporated into one practice, but what I kind of took it to be was kind of a step-by-step of getting ready to do some sort of working. So step 1, balancing. So that's the exercise where she recommends kind of a self check-in. And that's kind of the first step to preparing yourself to practice. So that's when you are kind of identifying any issues that are upsetting or discomforting to you. fixing them and trying to kind of like reattain some sort of physical homeostasis, and deal with anything just like immediately negative first, so it's not distracting you when you're trying to work. So, you know, like that's like, oh my gosh, the dogs are barking, like that is like crazy. Oh my gosh, the kids are doing this, and oh my goodness, or oh my gosh, the cat's on the refrigerator, why? Like, you know, so it's like I gotta handle my shit first so I can be a little bit more calm. So what do I need to do to find that balance so I can get into the right headspace? Then she goes into what she calls grounding, which I kind of interpreted as more of an energy-based technique, wherein you can kind of release any extra energy that is buzzing around. So like if you had just like a crazy anxious day at work and you're just like still thinking about like what someone said in the lunchroom or whatever, and it can be really hard when you have to focus and really hone in your intention or really dedicate the time that you need to connect with deity. So it really seems like more of an energetic release to me. And that's how I kind of interpreted that. And I do tend to do this both before and after a ritual. So it's kind of more metaphysical and energetic instead of physical and emotional, like balancing, right? So finally, and again, this I feel like is a little bit overcomplicated, to be honest with you. So I just do want to acknowledge that again. She goes into centering, which is kind of like the final step of this process, and I kind of feel like is a physical way of coming to awareness before working. So I often like call this, when I'm teaching, I call this coming to a ritual headspace, where like you are in your like peaceful place, you have all your candles lit, your incense is going, and you're just kind of coming to awareness before a working. So it's kind of a way to get in touch with your body and become more connected to the space around you. And I really find that is helpful when you are practicing outside in nature. Like there's just something where like something shifts and like you're just very aware of everything that's going on, and it's really, really beautiful. So I try to do like power poses around that time. So I know that's a little bit silly, but I really love Tadasana, which is the yoga mountain pose, which is like just awesome. So highly recommend. But that's kind of like how I understood everything. But again, I do feel like this is kind of like it could have been distinguished as like step 1, step 2, and then step 3 of like a grounding process.
Yeah.
If that makes
I agree. But thanks for the clarification, B.
Thank you.
So the beginning of lesson 2, she really is just talking a lot about how sovereignty is so important, and that, you know, we can kind of create our own reality, and that, you know, Hekate is a goddess that is actually completed through our devotion to her. And that's just, you know, again, another glaring difference between Christianity and this. But Becky, I know you had some thoughts on this section that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I mean, so like with the sovereignty thing, I think again, sort of what I was saying before is she's really emphasizing the fact that we are not subservient to or underneath. And like you were saying, Randy, it's like the juxtaposition to Christianity is really obvious here. And one of the exercises that she gives us in the book about this, of like practicing with this, is living an intentional life. And that being a witch that has sovereignty and can do whatever they want and having a magical life is having an intentional one. So she like has an exercise where you like go through a week and just set intentions for the day or set intentions to the meetings or whatever. And I just wanted to share my experience with that aspect of it, because it's brought a lot more mindfulness and awareness to my day-to-day life, instead of just like getting up in the morning and rushing through my day of like I have to get all this stuff done. It's given me a lot of permission to kind of just stop and set mini goals for the next chunk of time. And so, and while I'm not always successful in achieving those goals in that time chunk, you know, we're all human and things come in, whatever. But it's been helping so much with focus. And I can see how that is a foundational benefit to manifestation, magical workings, spells, like all of that stuff. Did anyone else have any sort of like aspects of the intention setting that was like amazing?
I have a similar experience with intention setting for manifestation. The author talks about how Hekate is sort of filtered through our personal experiences and our personal circumstances. So everyone's individual experience obviously is going to be different. And the way I had taken that is, in order to come into my own power, I need to sort of let go of my self-doubt and my imposter syndrome and really become okay with who I am. And I've been doing that with her through how I dress and how I talk to myself specifically. Not talking down to myself and not trying to have those negative self-talk, even just, you know, those little fleeting thoughts you have when you catch a glimpse of yourself where you do something silly or whatever.
Right.
Because they say in psychology, your brain doesn't know the difference. And I think it's similar to manifestation. If you have those thoughts, even if you're not saying them out loud, you're still thinking them into existence, you know? So that's a big thing for me, is consciously not just speaking it out loud, but also controlling the way I think about things and keeping those intentions for manifestation in my mind, as well as the official out loud intentions that I set.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also helped to. Sorry, B. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
Okay.
You go for it.
All right. I was just gonna say, it's like what you said of. It's also helped. Instead of it being like a big intentions having to be this big activity of I'm sitting down and I'm thinking and I'm gonna write out these intentions, it can be smaller, more manageable, and moment to moment intentions as well, and that feeds into the magical living, and it doesn't have to be a big production.
And I think that goes too with where she talks about putting in the quote unquote real work. It's not just I'm going to write down in my journal and then forget about it, and, you know, set it and forget it. It's about putting in the hard work of really changing your habits, changing your thoughts, and putting in that work towards your manifestation.
Yeah, I definitely identify with that, like the real work thing. Like in that exercise, one of my manifestations was like, today I manifest the energy to get the items on my to-do list done so I can enjoy my birthday, right? So because I wanted to get all my stuff done so I could just have a free day to myself. I was like, yes.
As you should.
Thank you. So I had this like crazy massive to-do list, and I got like all of it done, and it felt like I just was unstoppable. Like it was just, but it was like a conscious decision for me to do that. I was like, look, I want to do this so bad that I'm just not going to stop until it's done. And I literally, it was crazy. Like I got everything done within a day. And usually like I'm the person who's just like, oh, I wish there were more hours in the day, but yeah, it was awesome. So I definitely had like a very visceral experience with that, and a very intense one at that.
Yeah, I had a really similar experience. Like I'm gonna be honest, I didn't do the intention setting thing for the week for every morning. I already kind of do that in my practice, in that I do like a tarot drawing and then I journal about what that meant to me and how I'm going to use that to affect my day. So I didn't want to change that because I like that practice, but I will say I just felt this like incredible like passion to create and get shit done.
Yeah.
So she goes on to talk about the concept of a spiritual upgrade. And I don't know about how everyone else felt about it to me, but it was giving me very new age light worker vibe.
Yeah, I did not care for that wording.
Yes. And I did understand what she was saying, because we've all had that moment of just clarity. but
Mhm.
I definitely didn't like the wording.
Yeah, because it makes it feel like spirituality is like a game that you can win, and it's like,
Yeah.
no, like this is like what I do with my life. You
Like,
know what I mean?
like, girl, you didn't get that upgrade? What's wrong with
Yeah,
you?
right. Oh, you gotta upgrade your phone. It's like, no,
Yeah.
that's not quite. So, and I don't know that that was necessarily her intention, but that's how it came across to me, and I
Yeah,
was
I have
like,
a feeling that it wasn't. Not I don't
yeah,
want to rip on her.
yeah, right.
And I think, maybe that's a generational thing too.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's could be a disconnect with like language and communication that way as well.
For
But that's
sure.
okay, you know.
And then she goes on to she starts talking about the three selves, and this was newish information to me. This is very psychology based, I think, and I think it reminded me of like the ego, the id, all of those things. But she says
Mm.
the higher self is the home of intellect, integrity. The lower self energy gives us roots into the earth, and the higher self is the branches reaching up to the heavens. Um, she says the middle self is like primary energy is like the action that arises from the combined energies of our intellect and our emotions, and that was new to me. So this meditation was interesting. Did anybody have any thoughts on it?
So I had like it was kind of like a continuation of my experience with Hekate from the first ritual. So I had decided to do this specific meditation out in the middle of the woods because my partner and I went camping like under the full moon. So it was cool. It was like in the first kind of visions that I saw, she was like leading me into this temple. And then like once I was doing this meditation, we were already inside, and she kind of led me into kind of like a Roman bath. It was really, really beautiful. And when I got in the water, it was almost like I could see like the darkness kind of like going away from my feet, and then like my hair was covered in light, and I had like red light coming out of my chest and stuff. Which I know seems like
Mhm.
very dramatic, I know, but it was really again very visually intense for me. And it almost felt like it was me being rebaptized into something new, which kind of like touches on a very familiar thing for me, I guess, like with my religious stuff. So I was like, okay, I see what you're saying. I'm getting the point of what you're saying to me. I understand that this is like my path, and I got you. And I think like the biggest thing for me is like as soon as I finished coming out of the meditation, it started like raining really, really hard. And
Oh,
that to me was like very significant. So
Yeah.
yeah.
it's so interesting to go off on a small tangent that like the imagery of a baptism,
Yes.
while rooted in something that can come from the religious trauma,
Mm-hmm.
when you are the one making the choice to engage in a
Right.
practice, that's what makes all the
Yeah.
difference.
Exactly. That's how it felt too. So yeah, I don't know.
That's beautiful.
Ryder, did you have a certain experience?
So yeah, I tried this meditation on two different occasions, and I could not focus on either of them. And I don't think it had anything to do with the meditation itself. I think it was more the way it was written. Um, I just had to keep going back. She kind of like does this countdown where she has um, sort of steps, grounding and then breathing, and then I just had to keep going back and forth this book, and I kept getting out of my head trying to read what she was trying to tell me and then try to get back into my meditation. And so the second time I thought, okay, I'll read it all the way through and then try and do it and remember, and I just could not get focused. But I'll try it. Maybe I'll try it again and see. Maybe I'll have a better experience.
I really think like this is another one of his examples where this isn't necessarily a beginner's meditation. I know like Becca has a meditation practice. I have a meditation practice, and
Mm-hmm.
um, even for me, I had to go back and read.
Oh yeah,
Mm.
definitely. I had to review it a couple times, definitely, to like kind of commit it to memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so funny, Ryder, because I had like a same but opposite experience as you. Whereas like she does this countdown that you were talking about where it's like you count down from 9, and as you count down, you're releasing and relaxing different parts of your body. And that process just like triggered myself for sleep. I tried this 4 or 5 times. I even tried it again this morning before we recorded today. And like I do the countdown and I can get through the first connection part of the meditation and then I'm out. I'm just out for a couple hours after that. So I have not been able to finish this. Again, not for lack of trying, but just because like the structure of it has prepped my body for sleep. So
it was actually hypnosis. It was
Right.
I'm
getting very sleepy. Well, I did have kind of like an experience. Becca was talking about the red light, and where the energies are supposed to like coalesce in the body. And when I went through that, I'm gonna read a part of my journal where I describe that part. I said these energies coalesced in the middle of my body, and I felt heat. From the entanglement sprang a bright red fish that swam away from me, and I did not wish it to return. This was my self-doubt. And that was really like a really powerful feeling for me. So while I do think that was not a beginner for meditation, I did get something out of it. So
yeah, definitely.
You can try to do it again, maybe. I don't know.
That's so funny that you guys both had like the red imagery coming out of like the center of you.
I think she talks about
that's part of it.
Yeah. She
talks about and I've just never gotten that far.
Like a light. Yes.
The red represents like your middle self. It's like your passion or your it's about your actions and you wanting to go forward for yourself.
There she is. There it is. It tells you right there. 3 colors mingling together and you notice a 4th color.
I don't know where the fish came from. That's just me.
Another water image though.
Yeah. I do think that's interesting. Water is one of the elements that like, I'm an earth sign, but water is one of the elements that I really identify with. Whereas like fire, not so much.
Right.
So I wonder if that has something to do with it or I don't know. But lesson 2 kind of ends with that exercise, other than her just kind of going more in depth on some of the basics of modern witchcraft. Did anybody have a quick comment on that?
It's kind of funny. I'm actually just looking at the last 2 pages of lesson 1, and she talks about how this course is designed for a solitary practitioner, and here we are doing it as a group.
Yeah, no, for sure. I talked about that a little bit in the beginning where I said we're basically adapting it to group discussion, but we're still doing solitary practice of the individual exercises. So I think in a way we are achieving that.
I think the self-checks really make a lot more sense through that lens. But I think holding each other accountable sort of not replaces, but is a little bit of a placeholder for that. The self-checks, just in case. It's good to hold each other accountable.
Yeah, and I think we would be wrong to not mention the fact that I think Cyndi Brannen does have a Keeping Her Keys podcast.
Yes.
So she does go into more in depth on that. So if you want to check that out, you definitely should. Any other comments about the end of lesson 2?
No, I think just that lesson 2 is like, even though she covered a lot of basic concepts, it does also feel like anyone who wants to get back to basics as well. Like there's sometimes you get so going on your own personal track that you forget that there are other ways to do things that you have become so comfortable with, and that can offer some enlightenment and new experiences to you as well.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I guess we're going to call that an episode. I just want to say thanks for all of you who gave us a listen. We're really super open to comments, questions, suggestions, anything really. We just want to have an interactive audience because we're doing this for ourselves, but we're also doing this for others who may want to join us on this path. You can find us on Instagram. We have an Instagram page for the podcast alone under A Coven Reads. So feel free to interact with us there. I think we all have access to that account, so you might get an answer from who knows.
Yeah.
And we will be back with another episode of A Coven Reads, Keeping Her Keys. Next month, we'll be covering lesson 3, which is working with Hekate. All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.